Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We're very pleased that you decided to join us, and I think pretty shortly you're going to be very pleased that you decided to do so as well. I've known Jay and Greg for nearly a decade now, and I've had the honor to work with them both as fellow faculty members at the School of International and Public Affairs, but also working on a series of executive education projects, which have included clients as prestigious as the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Singapore, public safety organizations here in New York, the NYPD and the FDNY, and the creation of four major case studies, which, by the way, you can access for free if you Google SIPA, SIPA case collection. You'll see in cybersecurity four cases that were developed. They're both video and written. Uh, and Greg and Jay are the stars. Both of them have extensive academic backgrounds. They're well published. They both have major consulting roles. Both of them have worked in the White House. Both of them have worked for the US military, worked at the Pentagon. Uh, they couldn't have a stronger background or a more comprehensive background in this more important field of cybersecurity, and the need to maintain online presence in a constructive and often confidential way without compromising your organization. And even more exciting, these guys know when your systems have been compromised, how to get them back as quick as possible and making them even more secure the next time. So it's my great honor to introduce them. I think Jay is going to start, but it's up to you guys. So thank you again for joining us, and we hope we'll have a very productive hour together.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Bill. Yep. I'll be starting off and hopefully, can I get thumbs up that we can see the slides? We can see the slides. Okay. Yep. I'm Jay Healey. I run the SIPA cyber program here. It's great to be with you. I see a few former students out there, hopefully maybe even some future students. So first off, as we go through, we've got a few poll questions that Monica and Laura are going to pop up for you. And then we're going to talk about those questions. But the first one, so that Dr. Rattray and I can get a sense of what your experience is this one. Do you consider yourself experienced at cybersecurity, AI, or both? And if we can run the first, okay, good. The first poll is coming up. We'll give it a couple of seconds if you can start jumping in on that. While those answers are coming in, and we're having a few folks that are joining. So thanks that we're having folks that are both experienced in these fields, as well as people that are coming to get a little bit of a taste. It's so difficult in this topic because we are just bombarded every day, every week. New headlines are coming in, and some of them promise heaven about how AI is going to improve our cybersecurity, and others are promising hell, that it is going to be terrible and it's going to make cybersecurity even more difficult than it is. It's going to give attackers even more advantages than they have had since 1970, by the way, as the first writings that we see of people saying how we can't secure computers against the threat actors. So we're diving in on these kinds of questions today. Like, is AI gonna save us, or is it gonna doom us all? And because there's so many of these headlines, which honestly, half of them might be obsolete by Tuesday, we're going to focus in on ways to think about this, right? Well, we want to give you some context. If you're feeling cautious or confident, scared, or optimistic, we want to give you some frameworks and also let you know what the current best thinking and opinions are that we've been able to do in our research on this topic. And we see in the experience with cybersecurity and AI, about a third of folks are saying they have got a decent amount of experience on those two topics. So again, welcome. So with that, let's roll into poll question number 2. What are your organization's most significant or anticipated challenges related to cybersecurity in the age of AI? And let's run that next poll. Oh, yep, it's already up. And so please choose 3. We've popped a couple of the most popular ones into there. And some are really technical, like managing non-human identities, right? We're used to someone being taking actions on our network to be a person. But what is it? What do you do if it's an agent, an agentic AI that's now taking actions? And I can see we've got a range of these. The non-humans is a little higher than I might have expected, especially compared to autonomous agentic AI, which are reasonably high up there. And lower down are increase in supply chain and third-party risks, as well as compliance risks, which I might have imagined to be a little bit higher. So let's dive in. We want to give you some context for this. Because there was data out very recently from IBM that was saying not only had 97% of the organizations they talked to had already had an AI-related incidents, but those that included shadow AI, the costs were up over 200,000 more. And they go on to say if you had high usage, it was up over 600,000. Shadow AI is that term of if you're unauthorized, where an employee just says, well, let me go ask Gemini this question, rather than it being something that your company had provided to them to use in an official way that was monitored. And you can see on the right, this was from the World Economic Forum just this year, is that still a substantial number of organizations, a third, don't even have a process in place to assess the security of AI tools. And on this bottom right one, as you can see, a relatively similar set of things that you were worried about. The legal and regulatory concerns a little bit down on the bottom, the software supply chain, a little bit lower than those issues on the top. Oh, I'll share I think I'm sharing the results. Is that popping up? Okay, great. Okay, moving forward. So as we've been talking to experts in prepping for this, and also in just our research and our other jobs, it's been interesting what we're finding, because certainly AI is writing a lot more code. We've got a ton of AI code that's being generated out there, but on average, it's at least from what I've been hearing from the chief technology officer of Veracode, a guy named Chris Wysopal, absolute hacking royalty, and what they've been able to assess as they've been scanning the quality of code is that the LLMs are good at writing code. They've been able to write code that passes syntax, right? It's working code that was written in the right format. That's the blue line. But on the red line, right, it's been relatively flat in actually writing secure code. And they found in 45% of cases that these LLMs have been introducing a substantial known critical vulnerability, which in cybersecurity, the OWASP top 10. It's like these weaknesses that we've known about. So through the rest of this webinar, we're going to talk about these areas, and I'm going to kick it to Greg in a moment before we go to the next question, next poll question, to look at these risks and opportunities enterprises using AI, the risks to companies developing AI and models, and this overall balance between attackers and defenders. Right? In the end, is this going to help the good guys or the bad guys? And we're going to walk through each of those. And let me turn it over to so Greg, you've been working both as a professor and as a consultant. You were the chief information security officer for JP Morgan and also for ICANN. And so let me just turn to you.
Yeah, Jay, I think, I'll just probably start with some of the, challenges that I think AI is bringing to the general cybersecurity challenge, and then we can keep going, heading back and forth. But
Yeah.
uh, and I guess the other perch I have on the question, well, a couple. One is I'm the chief strategy officer for a AI for security operations startup company. So I'm watching us try to use AI on defense, right? So
Hmm.
I'll talk a little bit about how I think that's crucial. And sort of relate that to there, like it look like we have a pretty global audience, which I always appreciate.
Yeah.
The work I do tends to be global, and right now a lot of time in Japan at both the corporate and governmental levels, and the talent challenges in Japan, we have them here. They're even deeper there, right? In terms of
Hmm.
security operations personnel and the need to use AI for defense. It is going to make aspects of offense more challenging, right? I think that the near term, as I read research, as I work in the security community, is it's certainly speeding up the scale of activity, the speed of activity that adversaries can bring using the traditional vectors, how the comprehensiveness of scanning activity, the phishing attacks we get. I think worries starting to be actualized about how AI empowers the content to be a lot more convincing, both words and phishing emails, videos, voice replication, I think is actually one of the scarier things in terms of,
Hmm.
fraud types, cyber-based threats and tricking people into those sorts of things. So there's that first order, worry, and then so at the second order, I'm very scared that AI is going to make what I believe is the hardest challenge for offense easier, which is allowing adversaries to figure out attack pathways,
Hmm.
through defenses, especially using agentic AI that can actually try attacks faster, give feedback on where they got stalled, where like make decisions itself about how to try different things and try to get through defenses. That
Yeah.
might be kind of noisy, so there's sort of an offense defense balance element to that. But you've heard me many times say that the biggest challenge, especially at a national security level, on for offense is to figure out what in the target set is actually most important. Like what is the critical
Hmm.
nodes inside a target, which, in a fraud or criminal sense might be like where's the money, like which accounts have
Hmm.
the deepest pockets that I can rob, but on a critical infrastructure basis is where in the power grid, where in the water system, where in the telecommunications network. And I do think we have to be concerned that adversaries are going to get smarter on going after the crown jewels.
And can I just add to that? And then
Yeah,
I think I'm going to move to the next one.
yeah,
Also, actually, I'm going to add two things. Also, there was for years we've had issues with the theft of intellectual property, but the amount of material that was stolen might have been very difficult for the threat actors to translate or to absorb. And so that's not LLMs being really used on the attack, like you were describing how agentic AI might be, but it makes it a lot easier for them to figure out what they've gotten after the fact, right? If they've done a ransomware and stolen your data, they can then figure out much more easily, within minutes about what they have. Also, and two things that you might have seen in the news that I'll mention. Last year, Anthropic came out towards the end of last year to say that they had seen a threat actor associated with the People's Republic of China use Claude for basically an end-to-end attack, right? They were able to use the AI to mediate a lot of that attack. Now, in general, the attack wasn't terribly successful. It wasn't really sophisticated, but it was this first time that we were seeing it used not just for a specific purpose for quite a bit, and we might touch on that. There's also just news, and I think it came out more recently. It might have even just been this week, where someone had uploaded where somehow it got loose from the people developing this tool of an attack tool that was an entirely AI done. And it was exactly what you'd expect from an advanced threat. It was modular, it was sophisticated, it had all the features that you would expect from high-end malicious software, like 65,000 lines of code. And it appears it had been done by AI and perhaps by a single individual that was able to put that together. So these are the things that are getting at that for the that get us concerned on the, ooh, is this going to help the attackers more than us? And we'll get into these issues in a bit. But let's switch to risk management here as we go to the next slide into the third poll question. What are the top ways your organization has been managing AI cyber-related risk? And we've got, please select all of them that apply. And for those that might not have popped up, we've got everything from banning the use of all AI, which we still see in some places, to zero trust or red teaming or a bunch of other ways of doing cyber risk management applied to AI. And we've got some good ones coming in. Oh, wow. None for AI supply chain vetting, such as an AI bill of materials. So as those are coming in, thank you for responding. We really appreciate it. As we've looked at managing the cyber risk from AI, a lot of the early efforts were focused on the AI triad. Hey, we've got to worry about algorithms, we've got to worry about the compute, we've got to worry about the data. Nothing wrong with that. It was a solid way of thinking about it and managing the risk, but I'm really happy to report we've gotten a lot better at handling these kinds of risks than we had been. In particular, like I really like the work that some of my former colleagues from the White House have been able to put together on the AI tech stack of saying, hey, instead of just these three areas of algorithm, compute, data, we've got this whole set of areas that we need to be thinking about, where we can be thinking about security and controls from data, model, infrastructure, application, and governance. The tech stack is a very well accepted concept, and it's just a really nice way for us to think about this. So you can look it up. It's the AI Tech Stack report from Paladin Capital. It's from our colleagues Kemba Walden and Devin Lynch, along with people like Karen Martin and Chris Inglis, who are some of these names are some of the most important folks in American and British cybersecurity. So it's a nice way of thinking about the risks, the vulnerabilities, and potential impact. It's a short report. It's probably no more than 10 pages of strong content, and we really commend it for a strong way to think about it. But again, to me, the advantage of this is general. It's simple. It's a nice, easy framework for help us to think about that. But what does that actually mean? What do we actually do about the details? Well, fortunately for that, we've got a lot of other ways to look at comprehensive risk management, particularly the NIST AI risk management framework. I suspect many of you are familiar with NIST, the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, the folks that brought you the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, which is the most popular or powerful framework for looking at cybersecurity risk. And again, they walk through in a very structured way, as you'd expect from a national standards agency, of ways to manage risk related to artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. So this is going to be a little bit more intense than the AI Tech Stack report, but that it's meant to be. It's meant to help you walk through in a very structured way about to handle all of these aspects, from governance to AI models, tasks, data, and the rest. Of course, there is a ISO standard as well, which is the international standard, not just the NIST standard. And with that, and Greg has been very active in these areas. And Greg, let me turn it over to you as we're thinking about risk management.
Yeah, I want to build on, Jay, what you're saying. I think as we went into how to protect against cyber attacks and turned it into, a risk management discipline in cyber, I do think, the growing into a framework-based approach is the most productive path, right? I think we are better on cyber defense because we have some frameworks for understanding what we need to do. You can even benchmark against those. People can plot their journey forward. And I will say one of the more positive notes about the defensive side on AI is we getting after it faster than we did in some of the other cyber risks that involved mobile, cloud. Like we got,
Mm,
mobile, we were behind on cloud. We were starting to get,
mm,
faster at dealing with the risks that were posed with AI. I think we're doing it pretty quickly as we
mm.
start to adopt it. Like the AI risk management framework is coming out at the front end of technology adoption around AI. And I think the community should be lauded. I think this framework is very good. We use it in our practice. It resonates with companies about how to think about what they need to do, control structures that can be implemented, grading that can occur. I guess the other main thought I would have is I do see companies struggling with who's responsible for AI risk inside companies. Some
Mm.
companies have AI officers that are about adoption who also get to have risk. I do think CISOs, cyber guys are getting asked to manage AI risk as well, which I actually think is a good answer, but they have to build more talent in their own skill sets to understand it because it's more there's other risks that aren't inside of the cybersecurity risks that are posed by AI. But it is very cross-functional and a little bit like resiliency. It has a very sort of cross-cutting element in a company. So I'm starting to see a lot of AI risk committees where there's a chair for that committee, a CISO or an AI or chief data officer, but the company's management of it inherently involves a lot of different elements of the company. Having done a lot of enterprise cyber defense work, making sure you're governing, have decision making, investment ability in trying to do defenses or risk management is actually often the missing piece of this, the picture. So like getting after the AI risk management governance element of things, I think is very important. But again, maturing faster than I saw with cybersecurity.
I'd like to drill down on one issue there, Greg, and I went back to the to one of the previous questions um, about risks from relaxing cybersecurity controls to maximize adoption of AI. And 27% of folks, 8 out of 30 respondents, had expressed that as a current or anticipated challenge. And just to explain that, right? I mean, modern enterprises, especially if you're larger, like the banks that Greg and I had worked for, um, security controls are locked down, right? Companies have gotten especially good over the years at that. And so the concern is people don't want to be behind on AI, right? Haven't you heard? The CEO says, we want all forward on AI. The sales folks say all ahead on AI. We need to sell more. And you end up relaxing some of those controls, depending on software and models and AI and companies that are brand new that didn't exist 2 years ago. Are we still, is that still a substantial issue, Greg?
Yeah, no, I think it is. I, I think a lot of companies are worried that the normal cybersecurity control process will slow them down. And I've seen very different approaches. Like, a very large Japanese telecom mobile company is very AI forward. And I know that the CISO is responsible for AI risk over there.
The
And
Chief Information Security Officer. Yep.
yeah, so he's very challenged. He has a good sort of attitude towards it, but he's in that mode where I'm seeing where the dangers are retroactively and just trying to close them down.
Yeah.
In the banking industry, of course, or for those of us who have worked in it, it's the opposite with their risk aversion around and
Hmm.
strong control structures. They're trying to use risk management processes that really don't fit AI, and it's slowing down their adoption of AI and the business people that want to employ AI modeling and tooling are getting frustrated with the fact that they can't adopt the tooling and
Yeah.
modeling as fast as they want. So I see the current state of the art pretty all over the map. I think
Hmm.
technology and telecoms companies are, you going headlong into it and hoping that the risks aren't there and trying to close them out as fast as they see them. Where again, industries with a lot of regulation and control are having a hard time pushing into AI adoption because of those control structures.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I was going to ask about the regulation and compliance. All right. Let's start talking about something that Greg had introduced in his first comments, in how is your organization use AI to improve your own cyber defenses? We know this might not apply to everyone. You've got to know how your AI, what cyber defenses your organization has. But we're really interested in hearing what you have on this. So we can launch the next poll. The next poll coming up, Laura. There we go. Great. Fabulous. Thank you. And there was a lot of these we could choose from because AI is just so useful. So we looked to grab some of these uh, answers here, and you can see it going both ways, right? AI is really good at automating simple tasks, simple repetitive tasks, like filling out compliance reports, and which in cybersecurity is like a security plan. But you could also imagine we've talked to a lot of other companies that are trying to say, all right, advanced things like we're going to take the best threat hunter in your organization, the person that's really good at sniffing out in your company and figuring out where the adversaries are, and we're going to make that repeatable. We're looking at the complete other end. So as those answers are coming in, we're seeing just all sorts of stunning advances that are coming in on AI's use in cybersecurity. So the top box is from World Economic Forum, this report that came out last year. Like even in small businesses, 78% are using AI-enabled tools to help. So really just a very substantial amount of AIs that are coming out. The bottom stats are from Google, also from last year, where 46% of executives from organizations leveraging AI agents report deploying them for security operations and cybersecurity. But the number one concern is data privacy and security when they're looking at LLM providers. Okay, let's share this. Yeah, it just a great interesting mix here. With especially the automating routine security tasks and detecting attacks and anomalous behavior being at the top. And it's tough to figure out because every vendor says they're an AI company. At the annual RSA conference, which are the main cybersecurity conferences that happen every year, I got to walk the floor with a guy named Dave Attell, who's with OpenAI, and it was great. You could just see him zeroing on every company that every vendor that said they do AI. Really, what do you do for AI? That's not AI. And only a few he actually felt like, yep, you're doing real AI. So again, this is another stat from the World Economic Forum about how they're using AI. Mostly what we'd said. I think this largely comports with what we had seen from the poll, which I just shared. I'm using it for things like detecting and in those other areas. But this gets so difficult. Again, we've got so many of these ways that AI can help cyber defenses. We're really recommending using these things like the NIST cybersecurity framework, which I'd mentioned earlier. A good structured way of thinking about how to do defense and the main tasks involved in defense: identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. These are industry standard now. And as we start to see these claims and how we might use AI, it's so useful to put it into a framework like this to just make sense of all of these vast number of things that came up. Okay, last poll question. Oh, Greg, do you anything to add? I'm sure you have to add on this since you've been in the space before we get to the final poll question.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it, pretty brief. Certainly agree with what you're saying. One thing that Jay hinted at, please be skeptical. Like everybody's got an AI for security operations or says their tooling is AI empowered. Sort out what that really means and sort of the jump that's going to give them. getting that jump is hard. I'm the chief strategy and risk officer for what's called Andesite, again, a capability that's trying to improve the ability of security operations personnel. So, the notion that AI is going to speed up defensive analysis and response. That's sort of a given now. It's not easy to do, but there's 50 companies in our space. There was four when we started two and a
Oh
half
my
years
gosh.
ago. So like as a business proposition, it's hard because it's highly competitive, but that competition means defenders are going to get soon very capable tools, though I think right now the tools, and I talked to a couple CISOs, including a close friend who's the CISO for a big bank right now, and he's still skeptical about how much value added the tools have, but they're trying to use them because they know they're
Mhm.
coming. I think a theme that we have is improving the quality of the analysis and response, not just processing alerts, but actually understanding which ones are most risky and which ones have to be dealt with most deeply, as well as the growing scale, being able to deal with the magnitude, the numbers of things coming at you quickly enough to do something about it. I think those are the main themes I would have. But again, back to enabling governance and enabling Jay, you started with this, just the compliance teams to demonstrate that they've got that a CISO or an information security practice, a cyber practice has all the right controls. They're in operation. That AI will help the
Mhm.
ability to present all that in a high confidence way to boards and regulators and outside stakeholders. I think that what we call it GRC in the field, governance, risk, and compliance. I think AI has a lot of power for both efficiency and again quality in that realm.
Yeah. Yeah, I just had a piece that came out today over at Lawfare on saying modern IT operations are incredibly agile. Things like CI/CD, DevSecOps have allowed modern IT just to be incredibly agile and to operate at speed. And modern regulation and compliance hasn't. And I think things like AI and other innovations like OSCL and others I talk about in the article can really allow maybe regulation to be moving at speed. Okay,
Hey,
final bullet question. Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
sorry, Jay. Can I just add one more thought? I got it noted here. The other thing that I do believe it'll do is allow some of the tooling that we use on defense right now is very expensive. These SIMs and these big tools that the AI can leverage data much more efficiently than our current approaches do. So you're going to be able to save some cyber defense spend and reinvest it in the important things, which right now is a big proposition. We want our cybersecurity budgets to go down, and AI may enable that to happen as well
Yeah,
as just a practical matter. So, yeah, I wanted to get that thought in
great.
as
Yeah,
well.
appreciate that. Okay, let's put up the last poll. Perfect. Thank you so much. Because Greg and I teach, like we're not teaching, and SIPA is not a computer science department, right? We are a public policy and international affairs school. And so to me, when I'm not putting on my practitioner hat or Greg is putting on his consultant or his chief information security officer hat, right? The public policy question is, wait a minute, is this AI just going to make things worse? Right? Are we by doing this and investing in all of this when it comes to cybersecurity, are we going to be in an even worse place in 10 years than we are now? And if so, what can we do about that to try and turn that around? And so we see from folks, right? I mean, we've got a group of fellow pessimists. And I've got to say, I started in the pessimist position also, because for me, my assessment and this is how I think about cybersecurity, this relative advantage of attacker and defender. And as I said, since 1970, it's been one way with the attackers having the advantage. I would go even farther, and I don't know how to prove this, that every general purpose information technology has aided the attackers more than the defenders because it increases the attack surface. So that was my default assumption coming in thinking about this question. But at the end, we don't know. Right? You've got a bunch of things that help the attacker, as we talked about, and help the things that help the defender. Um, and so far, the answer I get from people I trust is that AI might be helping the defense more than the offense. So you've got, for example, the folks at Google, like people I really respect, like Charles Carmichael and Sandra Joyce, who have said, look, Google does both offense and defense, right? Predominantly we're defense, with our own security teams and companies like Mandiant. But we also run our own red team operations, right? Mandiant's red team operations are second to none in the world. And they find internally AI is helping them more on the defensive side to respond. That way, like I think that's a really important piece of information. The people that really support this say, wait a minute, the defense we've been missing on skills, the number of trained people, even with the places that can afford them, they're scarce resources, and we just have more companies that need and organizations that need cybersecurity than we could possibly have people or skills. And that's where you get the real benefit of AI. Across all of these areas like security operations, like Greg talked about. You can either spend a ton of money to build an amazing security operations, or you can spend less money and have AI do it for you. And that is really the technology that floats all boats. So again, I'm never expect to be an optimist in this, but I've been finding myself more and more convinced over time, and I hope it stays that way. But the pessimist in me says it is not, because again, we were 60% were favoring attackers. So either way, like the way for governments to hedge their bets and us to hedge our bets is to continue to invest in AI-driven defense. For example, DARPA has had just a big effort to push AI-driven defenses. Their previous effort 10 years ago was pushing not only defense but offense. And so I'm glad that they're just focusing on defense. And also, the way that we can assess this is going back to those frameworks, right? Just like we use on the left, the chart I used earlier, the framework to assess how it helps defense, we've got to do the same thing on attack. I use something called the cyber kill chain, which was developed by a former colleague of Greg's at Lockheed Martin as a way to assess what adversaries have to do. And by putting these side by side allows us to make these comparisons a little bit more completely. Because unfortunately, most of the way the conversation happens now is one side, someone will say, hey, look at what defense can do for security operations centers, or look at what attackers can do to assist gaining initial access. And this is going to be terrible, and extrapolating out from that. So this is where bringing in academics and others helps, because we can pull back and we can start looking at these frameworks. Okay, so I'm going to take a pause for Greg. You can start getting, and then we're going to go to Laura and Monica to start talking about what happens next. And we've been running a student-run cyber regulation newsletter. Comes out every 2 weeks. So if you're into cyber regulation and want to know what's happening in the United States, EU, Japan, Australia, and elsewhere, please email us or just scan that, or just check out, just put in SIPA and cyber regulation newsletter, and that will pop up. Again, completely student researched and edited. So with that, let's turn to Greg, and then back over to the team.
Yeah. One note would be, I agree with you, Jay, sort of particularly in the near term, there's real defensive opportunity again to scale out in help on the talent problem. But I'm gonna sort of pivot a bit from just offense, defense at the tactical, even operational level up to the risk level. And what concerns me in a decade-long time frame is the speed of technology advance. Like,
Mm-hmm.
AI is going to massively broaden the attack surface because so much more code is going to be written, and you've already highlighted that it may be, you know, my near term is that it's actually got at least as much vulnerability as, but we're just going to have a
Yeah.
lot more of it out there to defend.
Yeah.
But more importantly, quantum's coming. Other
Mm-hmm.
technology advances are coming. Some we can't even anticipate. That it is very hard to predict. Like just the effect of hardware chips or limits to the power grid, these intersecting technology waves, then, you put that in combination with changing ways that organizations and the social interactions are occurring as we become more digital in our lives. Add into that stew, the geopolitics we have. And, I see this next decade as having many, many unanticipated risks and black swan events. So while the strict cyber offense defense balance, I tend to agree, that there's some real opportunities for defenders who've been on their heels for decades. I do think risk managers and organizations and at the national level face a very much stormier, more difficult sea to navigate as we look into this next decade. I say that only to navigating with your eyes wide open and being able to see storms and anticipate and exercise and focus on resiliency is just something that's going to have to become inherently part. It already is a part of our lives and part of our organizational mindsets. I think we have to double down on that. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that, especially that last point on resilience, because this is one that you and I make a lot when we speak to audiences and we do executive education, is so much of cybersecurity is attackers come up with a new thing or there's a new technology and some cybersecurity company gets funding to counter whatever that new thing is. That company then gets bought up by Google or Microsoft or they go public. And it just kind of adds to the complexity, right? Resilience is one of the few general purpose cybersecurity investments where instead of just having to buy whatever that new utility is to help against whatever that new threat is, resilience, it kind of doesn't matter where the attack or the failure is coming from. If you're investing in good checklists and action plans and response plans and exercising the teams and exercising your board of directors, it kind of doesn't matter if you were planning to get hit by X and you end up being hit by Y because you've built up that muscle memory to be able to respond regardless of what it was. And that's really, really rare, especially when it comes to cybersecurity.
Yeah, and look to the Ukraine because, having, had dinner with the Ukrainian cyber person here in Washington last night, like the lessons we can learn from how well they've done in the past
Yeah.
4 years are lessons we need to glean. And, Jay, I just also talked to my SIPA capstone class, which is studying that. So
Yeah, excellent. Okay. Laura, Monica, tell us what happens next.
But with that, I guess I will start with Stephen Ross, who asked about quantum computing
Ooh.
and the dual challenge of securing AI and quantum computing.
Greg, maybe can you just kick off and just talk about quantum for a second and then and how you see it? Thanks for the question, Stephen. Great question.
yeah, well, I mean, just the baseline though, quantum, and I'm not going to try to describe the technology except that, the power of computing is going to massively increase. And, in my, last decade, the time horizon, I tend to believe people have overhyped things and things are farther away than
Hmm.
predicted. But I think the timelines are coming in for when quantum's going to become, a practical matter. Like all the technologies, it's going to enable and empower so many good things, across, what we use computing for. In the cyber realm, it's considered a particularly large risk because, it is known that it will be able to break one of our major defensive, barriers, which is encrypting, information, right? So there's a lot of analysis and good work and actually practical things to be done already in terms of get ready for when you think adversaries are going to be able to use quantum to decrypt things that are going on. So we call it post-quantum encryption. Again, NIST has done work. There's actually increasing practice around how to inventory your cryptography and get it ready for the wave of quantum on a defensive. I do worry a bit, Jay, that people are overly concerned about that singular aspect of how quantum creates, new risk in cybersecurity. And I haven't seen a ton of analysis of the intersection of quantum computing
Yeah.
capability with AI. I mean, know, one of the elements of AI is it just takes a massive amount of processing capability. I don't even know how the energy calculations, which are increasingly significant for the grid to support AI, change with the dawn of quantum computing. So, I have hinted at it just a little bit ago. My experience is it is very difficult to predict, and most people don't focus on understanding how big dramatic changes are about to occur. So that's my sense about quantum and AI.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly when I was at NSA in the mid 90s, they were talking about the concern about quantum. And just for everyone that to cover, a different way of doing computers, of computation, which in general is not particularly useful for how most of us do computers, right? It's not going to help us write a new presentation or write a short paper to keep your professors happy, is good on a unique set of problems that are exceptionally difficult to do with more conventional computing. Unfortunately, most of those are perfectly uh, mundane and boring, like how to
Well,
route a traveling salesman.
but also exciting, like solving cancer and
Yeah, oh yeah,
materials
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, some
Protein
big
folding and things like
yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly.
But also the case that we're worried about and that Stephen brought up, and we'll go to your second, Stephen, was the is breaking codes. That the one of the things that's really, 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 really difficult to do with traditional computing is to break modern cryptography because it's based on exceptionally large multiplying exceptionally large prime numbers. That's stunningly difficult to do with a normal computer. It's easy to do to encrypt, but it's astoundingly difficult to decrypt unless you can have a quantum computer for which it's relatively trivial. Stephen.
I just want to say that I agree with you with what you say, Greg, that it's still somewhere in the future. I've heard 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but there's a real threat now because of the harvest now, decrypt later. We've got a lot of things that are protected with crypto that may not um, be protected at the time that we need them. And something like a master file of customers
Yeah.
who will still be customers 10 years
Yeah.
from now.
And
That's a very like Stephen, that is really important. And one thing that I find is the risk there is dependent on how the value of that information atrophies over time. And I think if you look at that, it actually the value of information tends to atrophy fairly rapidly. Like, now like a JP Morgan customer list 10 years from now, I'd say has 20%. I'm completely pulling this out of the air, but like, the key there is, which of your information assets are long lasting, right? And, because I do think sometimes people get hyped about the like harvest now, decrypt later challenge that is, again, prevalent in this dialogue, but make sure we're analyzing whether the information that's harvested now will have value at that time.
yep,
If it's
great.
worth anything, I've been a Chase customer for 30 years. So.
Right. Yeah. So your
Right.
information is really valuable for, again, yeah, definitely
Uh,
post-quantum.
Is it possible to protect one's privacy in the face of cybersecurity risks? Is privacy threatened by automated surveillance using artificial intelligence? How can we protect ourselves from phishing attacks? How can governments protect themselves? And what is AI's liability in case of errors?
So thank you very much, Greg. Let me take a start and I'll bump some over to you. Especially I'll bump over to Greg, the is privacy threatened by automated surveillance using artificial intelligence. Virginie, thank you so much on these. I don't know, I think it's still open in the AI's liability, and neither Greg or I are lawyers or really know the state of the art on that. So I'm not quite sure. There's an upcoming event that might be interesting. Coming up on Tuesday, February 10th, one of our fellow faculty here, Evan Wolf, who's the lead cyber partner at Aiken Gump, which is a US law firm. They're doing their updates on privacy and data protection, including emerging AI best practices. That's coming up on Tuesday, February 10th at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. So for those of you that are interested, if you just look up Aiken Gump in NCR, uh, NCR year in review, I'll see if I can pull up the link and pop it in. They'll be able to, I think, give you the better answers on those legal aspects. I hope this link pops up. It's too bad we don't have Evan because I know he would love that question because he's just a delightful nerd. On the other ones, version E and is it possible to protect one's privacy? And protecting ourselves. It still is, right? It's just tough, right? It's tough. I've got a master's degree in this. I've been doing this for over 25 years. And when it's time for me to like reset, do my passwords and look at my password wallet and these other things, it can be overwhelming. And I've got a history in this field, and I despair about how it happens for people that don't have that background in that. And it's not generational. Like I think as we get older, we imagine, oh, the people that are digital natives will be able to be better at this. And it hasn't worked that way because it's just kept getting more complex. So the first question, is it possible to protect one's privacy? A lot depends on how much you want to protect it. Right. And it's difficult, right? If you want to use Google and if you want to use products from Meta and the rest, man, you might be able to protect it from one set of threat actors, but you're also giving it away to the others. In the US, where we've got data brokers, right, a lot of that just becomes a lot more difficult. And how can governments protect themselves? A lot going on there. I'd helped write the latest White House strategy. Oh, a new White House strategy should be dropping next week, written by one of our students, by Tom Lind, who's now at the Office of National Cyber Defense. And it's difficult because they're facing so many of the same problems. If it feels difficult for you or I, it's just really hard for them, regardless of where they are. Greg, you had this AI question, automated surveillance, and curious if you've got a thought there.
And my thought is there's surveillance. Those who want to surveil are going to be empowered by AI, right? Like mostly on the just large data set analytical element and, facial, like matching imagery, facial recognition, all these things. I think AI speeds up all those big data processes dramatically. So, uh, I think we're moving into a world where, you know, privacy has to be driven less by technology and more by social norms and political rule. The technology is going to enable very deep surveillance and, monitoring, unless, society decides in either its norms or its laws that these things are impermissible. Technology is going to enable you very deep, again, very deep intrusiveness into the privacy. We've got to protect ourselves through our norms and rules. That's my
Yeah,
basic thought.
I think it's something that our generation and the one before us got completely wrong, was that the internet and these communications technologies were going to allow a more genuine human experience and connection across continents and across cultures, and it was going to help us be more genuinely human. It has not worked out anything like that. It's been able to be much more used as a tool of division and control. We're on our last minute. Greg, just to finish up, would you have any views on international cooperation on AI mutual defense? Attack vectors are increasingly global, and actors can come from all sorts of background and intents. This was in the Q&A.
Right. I hate to do this, but I'm going to end on a very difficult note.
Uh,
Read Mark Carney's speech
oh,
at
yeah.
Davos, right? Like we are in a place where our institutions from the 20th century are effectively torn down and are not coming back. And this was a guy who built some of those institutions in the
Yeah.
UK and Canada. Um, the people on the phone, both older but particularly younger, need to be leaned into what the new institutions need to be. I have a 21-year-old and a 25-year-old, and I tell them we haven't left them with strong institutions. Their generation's going to have to find a new way. I think Jay and our roles are now to try to give some fundamentals, some frameworks for thinking for people that have to go rebuild institutions. So, yeah, I think that's the point of history we're at.
Thank you, everyone. I just want to say thank you again to both Jay and Greg for your incredible facilitation of today's conversation and for everyone's participation in the polling questions. It's very helpful for us as we develop executive programs with the School of International and Public Affairs. So thanks again.